Growing up on Ogden's East Bench, Mary Carver Hall took advantage of the beautiful foothills above her childhood home.
I grew up in these foothills. I kicked around the foothills with my brothers and climbed into caves and climbed up trees and caught snakes. And, you know, my mother was so tolerant. We always had animals at our house. My brother one time brought home a rattlesnake. He was going to keep that for a pet. Caught it in a paper bag. My dad didn't go for that. But aside from a rattlesnake, my parents were very tolerant about us having all sorts of wild animals as pets.
After graduating from Ogden High, Mary attended Weber State for a year before moving to Alaska to work.
I had a brother who was going to Alaska, and I thought that would be a grand adventure, so I went with him and came back to Ogden, worked, and then eventually I ended up moving to Alaska, spent 3 years there.
In 1980, she returned to Utah and came back to Weber to pursue a degree in the business field until a general education course changed her plans.
When I started back to college, I was determined to be an accounting major, and I was taking accounting classes. And then I needed a general education requirement in the natural sciences, and I took a class from Dr. Stephen Clark in environmental science, and that was it for me. That changed the way I looked at the world. It changed what my environment meant to me, and I changed majors at that time and graduated in botany.
When she graduated in 1985 with a bachelor's degree, she was expecting her daughter Rebecca. And that summer, she was hired part-time as a teacher at the Ogden Nature Center. For 5 years, she taught during the summer months, until the Nature Center had an opening for a full-time teacher. She applied for the teaching job, but she wasn't hired.
And I was devastated. I thought this job was meant for me. And at that same time, they were really looking for a director. I thought, I don't want to be in administration. I want to teach. But a fellow named George Wilson, who worked for the Division of Wildlife Resources, he and I'll never forget it. We went for a long walk one morning, and he said, Mary, you can influence the future of the Nature Center, and you can influence environmental education if you take this job as the director. And he was right. So I said yes, and I started in 1990 as the director of the Nature Center.
Her vision was to build the Nature Center into a community resource that could serve an urban population that was increasingly unacquainted with their natural surroundings.
As Ogden becomes more and more urbanized, we have kids in downtown Ogden that have really never been out into nature and honestly are a little bit afraid of it.
She spearheaded a successful effort to build an education center, culminating in the dedication of the building in 1997. It was shortly thereafter that she decided to make a change in her life.
In 1996, we had just finished building a building and the new classroom center at the Nature Center. And I felt like 6 years was enough time, and I wanted to leave on a high. We'd been very successful. I decided to step down, and I had just recently remarried. So it was a good time for me to sort of nest in my own home with a new family and a blended family, which presents lots of opportunities and challenges. And so I decided it was time for me to take some time off, take a step back, and decide what was next in my life.
Almost a year later, she was approached by a friend to consider taking on a challenge she had never before thought possible.
Adele Smith, who was a neighbor, very good friend of mine, she came to me the next spring and said, would you consider a run for the Ogden City Council? And I had never considered serving in public office. My heart was really in the nonprofit world. And I said, oh, I don't think so, Adele. She said, just think about it. Just think about it. So, and as I thought about it and I talked it over with George, he said, you know, Mary, this is an opportunity for you to really give back to the community.
She served on the Ogden City Council for one term and chose not to run for re-election due to a time conflict with a business she and her husband owned in California. Now, Mary continues to make a difference in the lives of those around her by serving as a community volunteer.
This year I'm serving as the president of the Board of Trustees for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Weber Davis, and I love it. And I also serve on the board at Weber Pathways, an organization that's working hard to preserve and protect our trails and open space in our community. And then I serve on the advisory board for Weber State on the National Advisory Council, and I'm enjoying that.
Weber State honors Mary Hall, one of our deserving recipients of the Distinguished Alumni Award.